Welcome, dear brothers and sisters, to those who follow the work of this team on a daily basis, and to those who are joining us today. We want to talk about an impressive bilocation of Padre Pio that has just been discovered. Padre Pio had several gifts. One very mysterious one was to communicate from a distance, and the most striking of this was the gift of bilocation. That is to say, while he remained in his convent of San Giovanni Rotondo, he was seen elsewhere on a biloca mission. There are numerous testimonies of his bilocation that even form part of the dressing for his canonization. Here we want to tell a case of Padre Pio's bilocation, which only came to light in December 2024. Father Pio celebrated Mass at St. Mary's Church in Pittsburgh, United States, while he remained in his convent in Italy, and the wounds on his hands and the fragrance they exuded were seen by witnesses. Music. First of all, we want to remind you to subscribe to this channel by activating the bell and to our newsletter. And on the screen, you will see how to collaborate with our mission on Patreon and in the same YouTube, so that this Catholic team from the Americas can continue to finance their research. Now, Padre Pio communicated with his spiritual children from a distance, one era through the perfume that the wounds of his stigmata exhaled. That fragrance is often described as roses, lilies, or tobacco of sweet pipe. He also communicated through the bilocation of his voice. His spiritual children and even people strangers to him have heard him at great distances giving news or advice, and even admonitions, especially in the middle of sleep, and they have heard his voice in form and understandable, but without seeing it. But the most striking thing has been his physical bilocation. There are news that Padre Pio was seen in various parts of the world when he never left his convent of San Giovanni Rotondo. He was seen by a man lost in the Sahara Desert, who then he was taken to safety by the mysterious stranger. This man's mother had sought the help of Padre Pio. He was also seen in other exotic places such as Hawaii and Siberia. Several witnesses claim to have seen Padre Pio at the tomb of Saint Pius XO on at least 5 occasions during the beatification of Saint Therese the Little Flower. A prelate was approaching him when he saw him in St. Peter's Basilica, but as he approached Padre Pio, he vanished. One of his first bilocations happened in the 1920s, and no less than in front of Pope Pius X. Pius XI. He held a meeting to evaluate a possible suspension divinis for Padre Pio that his opponents were asking for, and suddenly the door of the room opened, and a young Capuchin friar entered, who had his hands hidden in the sleeves of his habit, and even seemed to walk with a slight limp. He approached the Pope, kneeling down and kissing his feet, and then told him, "Your Holiness, for the good of the Church, do not allow this to happen." Nothing more than that. He kissed his feet again, asked for his blessing, and left the room as he had done. When they entered, the Swiss guards who were guarding the door said, surprised, that they had not seen anyone enter the room and that they had not seen any friars in Capuchin habits around there either, and Mother Esperanza, who worked at the Vatican, claimed to have seen "I saw Padre Pio in Rome on several occasions at the Holy Office every day for a year. He said he wore half gloves to hide his wounds. He greeted him, kissed his hand. Sometimes he spoke to him, and he responded." And there is a testimony of bilocation that just came out light in December 2024 during World War II. The American soldier Joe Paluzzo visited Padre Pio more than 45 times in his monastery of San Giovanni Rotondo between 1944 and 1945. His unit was stationed 60 kilometers from there, and he even took other soldiers with him to see Padre Pio. Padre Pio took him under his wing and considered him his spiritual son, telling Joe that he would take all Americans as his spiritual children as long as they were good Catholics and received the sacraments frequently, a promise that seems to have been fulfilled. This bilocation story was real and was told for the first time publicly by Geraldine Grimps, Joe Paluzzo's niece, in December 2024. It was a cold day in 1954 or 1955. Geraldine was a little girl and attended morning mass with her mother at the now-demolished St. Mary's Church in Pittsburgh, United States, intending to pray for her deceased grandfather. To the reception and surprise of those attending the daily mass that morning, the doors of St. Mary's were closed. The faithful knocked insistently on the doors of the rectory without receiving a response. While they were on the sidewalk in front of the closed doors, they saw two men with the appearance of monks approaching the church. One had gray hair and a beard. The other was a younger man, both wearing brown religious habits. When they arrived at the church door, the bearded priest showed a stern look and asked why the doors of the church were closed. Then the two mysterious men walked to the side of the church, and shortly after they opened the main door, which was locked from the inside, and let the people in. The priest never showed up. Shortly after, the traditional Latin Mass offered by the bearded priest began. When it was time for Holy Communion, Geraldine, who had not yet made her first communion, remained in her pew while her mother approached the altar rail to kneel and receive the Eucharist. When Geraldine's mother returned to the pew, she said to her little daughter in a low voice with enthusiasm, "The priest has holes in his hands like Jesus," and there was a strong and beautiful smell of flowers around him. However, there were no flowers around the altar. After the Mass, Geraldine and her mother waited outside the door of the sacristy to speak to the visiting priest, but after a while, the church lights went out, and they found the sacristy empty. It was as if the two men had simply vanished. Later, Geraldine and her mother saw a picture of Padre Pio and recognized him as the priest with holes in his hands who had celebrated that Mass before them. The parish priest told them that it must have been Padre Pio who was at that Mass. It's speculated that the younger man who was with Padre Pio, who was tall, thin, with dark hair, and who never spoke, could have been Padre Pio's guardian angel. Years after this incident, the Church of Santa Maria became the home of the Padre Pio Divine Child Jesus Prayer Group, and Joe Paluzzo, who lived nearby, was one of the founding members of that prayer group. Since Santa Maria had structural problems, it was demolished, and the Padre Pio prayer group that Geraldine attends today moved to the Church of San Blas. Joe Paluzzo, the spiritual son of Padre Pio who received his promise, passed away on January 12, 1996. That's all we wanted to talk about regarding the bilocation of Padre Pio celebrating Mass in Pittsburgh, which has just been told publicly for the first time by an eyewitness. If you liked what we told and analyzed, please like this video and share it with your friends. Leave us your comment on what you think about the subject. We would also like to ask if you know other saints who also had the gift of bilocation.